Well, everybody, there's a movement going on. We have all types of things happening in the United States right now. We got protests. We got people losing their mind. We got people that are actually trying to be on the right side of history right now. So, that and much more on the Brother and the Man show.
And here we are.
It is actually, what season are we really? I mean,
So
technically, we're season one of a reboot, but there's actually season three.
this is, yeah, sort of. All right, boys and girls, this is Brother and the Man. This is season one of multiple seasons, we hope. This is episode one. The reason we have a season is because at some point we're going to have to take a short break, so we want to break the year up. But a lot of things are not well defined. Black Lives Matter is exploding again. We are both sensitive to that. Obviously, look at the nature of our makeup and the title of our show. So, Brother and the Man used to be a podcast, mostly for fun, mostly for us. We are two friends. We used to be co-workers. We both work in the IT field. We're both educated. We both have college degrees. We're both in our 40s. We both have families. We're very, very similar, except for the obvious difference. And we are Brother and the Man. So we used to do the podcast, and we stopped. President Obama was elected. Then President Pumpkin was elected. And now we have the country that we have. So we've been thinking that maybe we should, as older people, revisit the idea of talking about common sense and where we stand. I'm a conservative who moves to the middle. And PJ, the brother, is, how would you describe yourself?
I would say I am fiscally conservative, but socially liberal. So I'm in the middle. I lean more towards the liberal side, but liberal to mid, liberal to mid.
Right. And I actually am very much similar. Fiscally conservative. I think government should be small where it can afford to be. But, anymore, I don't know that that's viable. So my own perspectives, being practical, have evolved and changed over the last 10 years. So there's a lot to re-explore. But the point is that this is a conversation between two friends who live 1,000 miles apart. We're doing it and recording it for posterity. It will be on audio and video, so we're planning on putting it on Facebook and YouTube if we can figure that out. And we've been planning on doing it slowly, deliberately, a lot of testing, a lot of setup. But we decided, given the topic of the hour being the beginning of June 2020, it was time to go. And so the quality may not be great. My lighting is poor. I don't have the best camera. We're going to improve everything we can, but the real point is the conversation itself. That's the content. There's two things. The conversation is for us. We are our own audience. Anybody that wants to go along for the ride is welcome. But we are having a conversation for ourselves. So if it's not of interest to you, or if you don't agree with us, that's fine. Leads to the second point. We mean no offense to anyone. We're professionals. We can't afford to be canceled by the cancel culture. We don't tend to be politically correct, but at this point we're very politically sensitive. So we hope that no one takes offense. We hope that everyone understands where we come from and gives us the benefit of the doubt, puts our stuff in context. That's my single biggest worry about doing this, and it's the main reason we haven't done this years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree. Based off of some of the other places that we come from, I used to do a sports podcast, and like you said, you and I, we used to do, I would say, more political type of entertainment podcasts. I think what we wanted to do, when we've been talking about this all these years, was to kind of bridge that gap to be not so political and not so sports oriented. And then the topic of today that we're going to talk about is very political and sports oriented at the same time. So,
Right.
back to the front.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, and we're still playing with this, but, this is Brother and the Man, season 1, episode 1. The title of the show is Black Lives Matter. And
So
go
if
ahead.
it offends you, you might want to turn off right now.
Yeah, but see, that's part of my point. I think that, how do we start? So my major concern for years. We could probably go back, if we did the homework, to the podcast, which was 10 years ago, and find some roots to some things that are happening today that we talked about. When Barack Obama was elected, I know that I said something to the effect of, it worried me, not because I had a problem with him being elected. I voted for him, but that I was concerned about what would happen to the country. And at the same time, I come from a perspective of, I don't know where all these racists are coming from. I really don't know where it comes from, because I never saw it growing up. And that's not a naive, it doesn't exist thing, because I ran into it. I've seen enough of it to know it's real, but I don't know where it comes from, because I don't know who those people are. They're not coming from my family. They don't grow up with me. And I run into them very infrequently. So when I grew up as a military person, as a child of a military family, of course, women are just as capable in the workforce and should deserve equal pay. Of course, people of all races, not just black or white, are equal. That's who we grew up with. I want to be very careful about not flying the "I have friends" or "I grew up with" or whatever family, but to a certain degree, it's true. So it's I'm taking over the conversation, and I don't mean to, but it's difficult to kind of wrap your brain around. So I want you to talk, and then I got my little piece, and then we'll get into something specific. But this is us just rapping, ladies and gentlemen. That's
Right.
what this is. We're not ready. We're not produced. That'll come later. There'll be much more about who we are later. Right now, this is just an open conversation. We know what we're going to say, because we've had this conversation every time there's a protest. We have the same conversation over and over again, but it's snowballing. So and we're putting it down. So here we go. So I'm going to give Pierre the soapbox.
So what I will say is this, and that's one of the things you point out is at the beginning of this is our similarities. And I'm going someplace with this. Much like you, while my father was not active duty military, he was a former Marine. And, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was one of the first African American members of the Army Air Corps. I was in the Air Force myself. So we have this long lineage of military in my family, which is another way that you and I are very similar outside of the obvious. Much like you, and I want to be careful how I say this, because black people always misconstrue this when I say it. I didn't grow up with a lot of overt racism. That doesn't mean it did not exist, but I wasn't walking through like what was going on during Brown versus the Board of Education. It wasn't like that at all. And so I've never experienced it as overt as, say, someone like my father did growing up in Mississippi. One of the things that you touched on when we were podcasting before had to do with, you didn't know where the country was going to go. When Barack Obama was elected president, you were worried about it. And you said, hey, I don't know where these races came from. To give a little background on that, here's what I think actually happened. For years, black people were told what they can and can't do. They were told, like, if they were in poverty, you need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. There are all these things that were said, right?
I
Along
said
came
some
this
of those
person.
things not
Right.
10 years ago.
Right. Along came this person that became elected president, a person that my parents, they cried election night back in 2008, and I cried for them because of what they were told for years, that, oh, you'll never be alive for a black man, black person to become president. And so what that did the night that Barack Obama became president was a lot of folks that were Caucasian or other races besides African American saw that, hey, this wasn't supposed to happen. What am I doing with my life? What makes him so special to where he gets to be president and I don't, which is where I think our current president has an issue. And that's what his obsession is with our former president. So a lot of folks saw that wait, we didn't really, this is me paraphrasing for people now. A lot of folks saw like, wait, hold up. We didn't really mean you were supposed to pull up by your bootstraps and do it without help. There was always some excuse. And so that made a lot of folks angry. I saw this professionally, even at work. There were a lot of people that were upset. People that used to talk to me in the hallways stopped talking to me like I had been elected president. So there were things of that nature going on. There were things you'd hear at work, all types of things. And so
You're
that
losing,
really shook a whole lot of people.
you're losing me. Are you saying that as a black man entered the White House, there were white people that suddenly weren't good with it, or there were black
Oh, yeah.
people that weren't good with it?
No, there were white people that were not good with it when a
Right.
black man entered the White House. And like I said, there was a lot that I even saw at work with how a lot of people that would interact with me before, how they interacted with me after he was elected president. And so that was very interesting to see because I knew why it was happening, like it was my fault. Um, but yeah, a lot of people were forced to think about their privilege in this country and how
There's
they
that
had pretty
word.
much, yeah, there's the word, but we're going to go there. And so they squandered their privilege pretty much because someone actually did the exact system, what they had been telling a whole lot of other African Americans that they need to do in order to be successful and respected, and all the little code words got used against them. And so because of that, that manifested right around the time social media is really blowing up. Then you start to see people they're coming up with fake stuff that they're posting out there. They're posting things from behind a keyboard that they wouldn't dare say in public. The great thing about social media is it keeps a record of everything, and people can't run away from that, and it's being used against them. So that's where I think the origin of what's happening today, when you combine that with the violence of the civil rights movement, and make no mistake about it, a lot of people want to say it was a nonviolent movement. The people that organized it were nonviolent. That doesn't
No,
mean they still weren't getting busted in the head and water hose down.
there was
So, in that,
there's a lot of violence. Go back to the 60s. Look, one of the things that people around me panic about is, the protests are violent, the protests are not friendly, right? I feel uncomfortable around protesters. You're supposed to feel uncomfortable around protesters. And I have that problem myself. I don't want to go to a protest. I go out of my way to avoid them if I can. That doesn't mean I'm not sympathetic to them. I think everybody does. But then there's the looting. And some of the looting has gone past that into, well, we'll touch on one thing here in a minute. But the point is that even as bad as it is, I don't think it's as bad as it has been historically in the 50s and the 60s. And if you go back 2 generations before that, no one even thinks about. I mean, lynching is a term, but it's a real thing. And I'm not dismissing what's going on today. That's the last thing I want to do. But I do want to tell people who are extremely concerned that this is the end of the world to have a Coke and a smile and relax. We're going to get through this,
right.
and something positive is going to come out of it. That was really slow. See, like I said, we're working out the bugs.
Right.
Go ahead with your
Well, I
point,
will
though.
say, I will say this to you though. The reason why, yes, it is. You can say things are not as bad as they were back then. Absolutely not. And the reason for that, there are a lot of laws in place right now.
And I mean
You
the
can't
protesting. I'm not speaking
right.
to
Okay.
the situation between various demographic groups. I'm not undermining that at all.
Right.
This is not hey, it was, it's way better than it was, man. Relax. I'm saying is protests, you haven't seen protests. Go back and read some history. History has a
Right.
tendency to clean up the bad and amplify the good. So we think about
And I think, but you
the
know
flower
what
and
though?
the gun at Kent State, but we don't think about the people that died at Kent State.
Right. And therein lies the issue with what we have going on. It's because the United States as a whole, and I think we've talked about this, the United States as a whole does not settle up and take ownership of what our history is. We want to sugarcoat it. We want to sweep it under the rug. We came up with terms like, oh, we're going to promote American exceptionalism and things like that. We have not that we need to confront it. We confront it every day, whether we like to or not. We have not taken ownership of what our history is to say, yes, what we did was pretty messed up. What our country came from that is not what we would wish upon anybody. But that's what we did. We own it, and here's what we're doing to make our country better today. Instead, what do? We make excuses, or that's old. Why are you still thinking about that? And all these other things. So why we don't want to go ahead and acknowledge what our history is. Our
I
history
don't.
is not peaceful.
I
It's
don't want to.
violent
I don't want to
and it's
deal with slavery.
discriminatory.
I don't want to deal with slavery because my parents came over. My ancestors came over from Europe 67 years ago. I can say, for the most part, that blah blah blah. But
But do we
the,
even teach
that's the
that in school now, though?
That's the whitewashing that you're talking about. It's the we want to all move past it, and it's natural.
Right.
You don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. We shouldn't have
Right.
to deal with it, but it's still out there. So
Right.
we have to deal with it. And that's the problem that we have. We've talked about that, in my mind, and you have agreed, that the singular problem with this country is that we continue to live separate lives. We're not separated legally, although the law fails often, but we're separated culturally. And we don't communicate. So we go from two modes. We go from everything is fine, and we have to be professional, which you spoke about, and you're going to speak about. We put on our we put on our best face, and we behave, and we're extremely polite, tactful, and we don't talk about anything that might be sensitive or offensive. We just go about our day, and we say hello and goodbye, and then we go home. And then these conversations happen, but they happen far too infrequently. And then the black guys talk to the other black guys about the cracker at work, and the white guys talk about the looters and how they need Adidas or whatever, and we don't actually talk to each other. And the prime example of that is the term Black Lives Matter. You say, not you, people say Black Lives Matter, and then someone else says all lives matter. And neither of those people are bad. What's not happening is a conversation about what does that mean to the first person. The first person is trying to deliver the message that, look, in some instances, people who are black are being treated like their lives don't matter, to the point that we think they're dying. The police are so afraid of us, so reactionary to us, that boom, somebody had to die, and it wouldn't have been that way if the color of their skin had been different. Understand, we want you to understand that Black lives matter. I'm black and my life matters. But there's some people at home that are white and have good intentions and don't understand where that comes from, and they say, no, all lives matter. You mean my daughter's life doesn't matter? And that's not the point. But then we come out of our corners, and it turns into, Monday Night Raw with the highest of stakes, instead of somebody stopping and sitting down and having a conversation. And then the extremists come out and paint is thrown, and we don't ever have that conversation. We never get a chance to talk about these things in a calmer period, because we're so exhausted when the violence is over and the hurt is over. We just go back to our corners. I mean, that's the definition of the 80s. We were so exhausted from the 60s and 70s that we spent 20 years not talking about this stuff. An entire generation just kind of hoped it would get better, and it didn't, at least to a certain degree.
I will say this. When it comes to the All Lives Matter crowd, I don't want to go and say everybody is racist when they say that. There probably are some genuine people that say, well, all lives matter. But at the same time, they should be able to listen to why someone is saying, hey, Black Lives Matter. But I feel a lot of times people know exactly what they are doing, because racism is so ingrained into our culture. And once again, here I go again saying how we don't acknowledge and take responsibility for our past. It is so ingrained in our culture that they can say it to you with the purest intentions on their face, but know exactly what they mean deep down inside. So I'm not ready to just go ahead and give all lives matter people a pass, or most of them. And I know what you're saying. But a lot of people use that as a weapon, and they know exactly what they're doing when they do that.
Let me be crystal clear right now before we go any further. I am not giving those people a pass, except in the situation where they genuinely don't realize what they're saying. There are good people. There are a lot of good people who just don't know how to have this conversation, don't realize that this conversation needs to be had. They live their lives. They have no hate for anybody. They have privilege, but they don't know it, and they don't have any bad intentions. And I think that part of this is a lack of information, but I also think it's a lack of giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. And I think we've lost that. We don't have mutual respect because everybody's angry all the time. And the bloated son of a bitch in the White House does not make that better. So that situation has gotten worse since we did the podcasts.
I will say this: when it comes to that saying, and you'll understand the code word I'm gonna use when I say this. When, as he's affectionately known as on Xbox, if he still plays Xbox, when DMFC says to me, or if he were to say all lives matter, I know where his intentions are coming
Right.
from, right? If people that work on the property in St. Louis
No, I
that
get
work
it.
on a particular floor say certain things, I know the difference,
I get
and
it.
therefore
And-
I'm not. Yeah,
Yeah, and it doesn't pass the smell test sometimes. But then there are other
right.
times where I think it does. But hey, there's an example I like to use, and I've used it over and over again because it's a personal example between us, and I'm going to leave the people out, and I'm going to go through the story very quickly. You know what? I'm not going to do it. I was going to tell the story about the going away card that had the chimpanzee on the cover, but the short version is that somebody bought a card for someone who happened to be, they weren't even African American, they were Caribbean, but it was like a going away card, and it happened to have a chimpanzee on it. And it's not me, it's not my family, it's not Pierre's family or the brother's family. It's someone that was an acquaintance at work, but the entire thing got shut down. And the problem is that this little white lady that bought this card had good intentions and was oblivious to the inference, and so there are people who are in real danger of putting their foot in their mouth or worse because they have no one, they just don't know any better. And again, it sounds like suddenly the whole episode is trying to buy cover for the white man, and that's not what I'm here for. So we'll move past that because no, it's not.
Right.
I want to
Right. No,
avoid that,
no, I know.
but it comes up, But what do you think of the current situation?
So, what I think of the current situation. So, everybody knows why we're here. It's not just because George Floyd was put to death, murdered by Minnesota police officers. It is a long line of this type of thing happening. And any saving grace that has come out of this is that there is now proof of this type of injustice, this type of murder, this type of executions, modern day lynchings, if you will, of African Americans. Because let's face it, there is different policing that happens for African Americans as opposed to Caucasians. So there's that. So now we have this huge protest. And I think what feels different about this time than before is because some of the people that are growing up now that are protesting, they're older now from when the protest was happening before, when it started to reach a crescendo in 2015 when Michael Brown was shot and everything that happened in Ferguson. So now this has continued to happen. It's almost like hunting season, that there's a particular point during each year that there seems to be this crazy rise in how filmings of police not policing correctly when it comes to African Americans, that seems to get filmed more, and you seem to see a lot of it. I mean, it's always happening, but it seems to really ramp up right around this time each year. So that's why we are at this point right now. It's not just because of one person, it's because of the continued police abuse and the police's inaction to try to police themselves. The police unions are a joke. I hope they go away or whatever happens, because, they work well for Caucasians. Ask the police officers in St. Louis how well the police union work for them if they're African American. Not very good. You saw that situation play out in Minnesota with the guy that shot the white lady, the Australian lady, a couple of years ago. He got put in jail quick. It took a while to arrest just these four that were complicit. One that did murder George Floyd, and the other three that stood around and watched. They're changing their story now, whatever. So what I think about it right now, protest is supposed to make you uncomfortable, whether you agree with it or not. People, what tends to happen most times is folks want to take the conversation away from the protest because some bad element, and it may not have been a person protesting, it's been proven that it's folks outside of the protesting circle that are causing things to happen as far as property damage, looting, etc. Looting has happened at every particular point in American history, whether they were protests or not, simply because what are we as Americans? We're opportunistic. And if we have a way to get something for free, we're going to try to get something for free while no one is looking. That's just how it is. That should by no means co-opt what is actually happening. And I think a lot of times the media, the right-wing media, the liberal media in some cases as well, tends to try to take the onus away what's really going on to go with the sensational story, because what sells? What sells is putting the fear in the white folks about what black people are doing. What black people are doing, we're protesting and we're mad as hell and we don't want to take this anymore. We will demand that we be treated fairly. That's all we're asking for, fairly. I've made the example before of, and I live here in Denver. If somebody walks into a movie theater and opens fire, black or white, I expect them to be put down by the police because that's their job, because that's an immediate threat. If I get pulled over for a speeding ticket, that should not be an automatic death sentence. You
Okay.
you follow your handbook is what you should do. And that's what people are we just want fairness. And we want a change to how police actually act when it comes to interacting with people of color.
So, so one of the things that I've wrestled with over the last week, when Michael Brown was killed, I the protests were new, right? And they were in my face. You were out of the market by then, right? So, for
Yeah, I was
background,
in Denver then.
I moved. Yeah, you moved to Denver. I moved to St. Louis in '83. So I've lived here for 35 years. Pierre was born and raised in St. Louis, but has moved to Denver. What, 7 years ago? 10 years ago?
It'll be, wow, man, it'd be
Seven-ish.
8 years ago. And yeah, 7.5 years right now.
Right. So it was in my face, right? And it was scary. I'd not, everything the first time you do it, it is scary, even if you academically know about it. So, I was flustered. I don't want this country to be racist. I don't know where it comes from, like I said before. So, to a certain degree, there is a certain amount of denial. There is a certain amount of, you know, explaining it away, right? I want it to be a one-off incident. I want it to have been a tragic mistake and not a murder. And that analysis still goes on today. I think that this most recent one, and many that have happened since, are clear cut. So the pattern, the smoke is there, and there must be fire. And we've been through these protests in St. Louis. This will be our fourth round in less than 10 years. So, it becomes something that you must acknowledge. And I'm probably a little bit better prepared than some people I know to do so. And I do. So now I'm prepared for it. I'm going to avoid it for the sake of physical safety. And I'm good with my conscience on how I live my life. I acknowledge that, as much as I hate the term white privilege, it exists, and I try to work around it as best I can. But it is what it is, and it's going to take a community approach. As an individual, I have to live my life as best I can and set the best example for my family and the people around me, and then be good with that. But at the same time, we're putting this on the internet, and it's cancel culture time. And so, what are we going to do? So, what can I say? What can I say without sounding like I'm trying to make excuses, get myself off the hook, get white people off the hook, minimize anything, maximize anything? And I don't know what to say. I don't know how to put it. I found something, and I haven't given this to you before because I wanted to get your take live. But
Okay.
it's something that's floating around. It's on my Twitter feed, and I'm going to paraphrase here. I'm going to try to go through it quickly. But this spoke to me, and this kind of captures what I hope my thoughts are, and what my advice to other white people that are similar to me might be. Right. So it's a Twitter feed, and it's by a comedian named Kenny DeForest, and I'll just read this here. He says, my coolest night of comedy was when Dave Chappelle dropped at the Comedy at the Knit when Willie Miles and Clark Jones and Kenny DeForest, were hosting. We were in the back room, and he was in town supporting Kevin Hart, who was on SNL that week. And he texted Joy Nicole, and he said, quote, any chance Dave wants to go up. So Dave Chappelle, black comedian of the year last year, or no, he won the Mark Twain Award last year, almost kind of a lifetime achievement award. And to my way of thinking, one of the most brilliant minds we have in America, race or otherwise. So when he's speaking on the issue, I think it kind of it speaks to me, right? So he said, we start the show thinking that Dave might come. A couple comics in, he sneaks in like a boxer with his hood up. We're in the, that's terrible. See, the graphics aren't working great on this show. All right.
I saw it.
No, but I could see you in the background. The dude is a machine. He comes up on stage. Every topic came up, he had something profound for. And we bring him up last, and the crowd loses it. He was asking the crowd for headlines to riff on. So they toss him out. He riffs a joke. Every topic, he immediately has a perfect joke for it. Now, this is the day after the cop that choked Eric Gardner to death in Staten Island was not indicted by a grand jury. Protests, etc., were all over the city. Tensions were high. This is in New York City. About 15 or 20 minutes into a set, he asks for another topic, and someone shouts out police brutality. And then he pauses. Again, this is Dave Chappelle, and he says, you really want to do this? Okay. He chugs his Tecate, and he sets it down, and the crowd was always beautifully mixed. It's a show that was started by Hannibal Buress. So that crowd has a black base, but it's in Williamsburg, so they're hipsters of all persuasions, blah, blah, blah. It's a cosmopolitan crowd. So Chappelle starts talking about Eric Gardner and watching him get murdered in cold blood on camera and how it makes him scared for his children. I know that you've mentioned how you have to be careful, the conversation, people who aren't in black families, I don't think are aware that happens. That is the conversation we need to be having. White people don't know that you're doing that you feel that way. And that is the conversation we need to be having. We need to wake some people up, and that is what needs to be woken up to. When the protests are done and there's not been any murders for 6 months, that's still a problem. Don't go to a party by yourself. Don't get drunk. Those kinds of things. Because if it comes, it's going to be bad, and you won't have anything to back you up. I've had that conversation. I've seen that conversation amongst my extended family. DC, you know who I'm talking about, right? So
Yes.
I've been on ride-alongs with him enough to have gotten the dirty look and to have felt that tension just for entering the room. So I can't empathize. I never will claim that, but I've got sympathy, and I think I know a little bit more. That's what he's talking about here. So he's talking about, he has to take care of his children. And I remember he said, I thought body cameras would help out, but what good is video evidence if you all don't care? A clearly privileged white girl, and he comments that she had a white-brimmed hat on, a felt white hat, for Christ's sakes. I don't know how that's relevant, but it's in the Twitter feed. He says, she shouts out, life's hard, sorry about that, and takes the air completely out of the room. It's a collective gasp, and Chappelle zeroes in on her. What did you say? And she repeats it. Chappelle starts going in. He starts educating the crowd. Now, this is where it really gets deep. He starts educating the crowd on black history, history of black people and the police. He talks about the slave patrols and Rodney King and Watts and Emmett Till and Black Wall Street. And he talked about Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and he talked about John Crawford III. If you don't know who John Crawford III is, Google it. It happened right around the time some of the higher profile killings happened, but it's as awful as anything you'll see. He was on the phone in a Walmart and picked up a BB gun that was for sale in said Walmart. I think it was in Atlanta. I could be wrong.
It was in Ohio. It was in Ohio.
Ohio. Okay. And
Yes.
he was just looking at it. And some scared cracker ass called the cops. And the officer, again, this is Chappelle paraphrasing, and the officer comes in, doesn't even bother saying drop the weapon or hands up, and he just guns him down. And the security footage makes it as plain as day. The footage will make you sick, disgusting, and outrageous. in every conceivable way. Chappelle then tells a story about getting pulled over in rural Ohio where he lives. This is before the Crawford shooting, but after Ferguson. So again, racial tensions are bubbling. He said, I may be white on paper, but I'm black, so I'm nervous. He says the cop approached him and he can't tell I'm nervous. I have both my hands on the wheel and I say, officer, my license and registration are in the glove box. I'm going to reach for them now. I promise I'm not armed. I could tell the officer was offended that I was nervous. He said, I know who you are. You're Dave Chappelle. And I said, okay, so why do you need my license and registration? So Dave Chappelle gets off with a warning. The twist, it's the same cop who would then go on to murder John Crawford III. And Dave Chappelle's takeaway is, quote, I shouldn't have to be Dave Chappelle to survive police encounters. Okay? He then goes on to explain that one of his best friends is in South Africa. He said, I asked him what it's like in South Africa right before apartheid ended, and he said it was chaos in the streets. There were riots, and there were car bombs, and there was violence, but the amount of people caring had hit critical mass, and there was nothing that the establishment, could do to stop it. The people had momentum, and apartheid ended. Critical mass, and that's what we have to hit. Once we have enough of you who care, there will be nothing that they can do to stop the change. It was incredibly powerful, and the crowd was somber and silent. After the show, now, number one, that's Dave Chappelle in a nutshell. Right. He should be running for office if he has the ability, because he's a teacher and he's a leader, and I would follow him. I'd love to meet the guy for 5 minutes. After the show, they were in the green room, right? So this is where the real point of me reading this to whoever wants to hear this is. After the show, they're in the green room. Joey Nicole comes in and says, that dumbass white girl wanted to talk to you, but I told her we were busy. And he goes, no, Dave Chappelle goes, no, bring her back. So Joelle leaves and comes back with the wide brim hat girl and her friend. Hat girl is humiliated, and her friend even more so. The girl speaks first. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what I said, and that thank you for educating me. I was ignorant before, but I want you to know I've learned from you tonight, and I won't say things like that anymore. Chappelle responds, you're okay. That's all we can ask. Know better, do better. I want to thank you for hearing me and listening. That's your role, and now you know. Now you're part of that critical mass we talked about. And the next time you hear friends say something ignorant, shit, like you said, it's your job to correct them and share with them what you learned tonight. Then you're no longer part of the problem. You're part of the solution. She starts crying, and he pulls her in for a big hug. It's okay. You're part of the solution now. Do you want a picture? She says, really, of course, and they take the picture, and, that's the definition of class. He changed everyone in that room that night. 200 plus people became part of the solution, if they weren't already. Even the privileged white girl with the hat. Point is, it doesn't matter what you thought before. You can always change, and you always become a part of a critical mass trying to push this shit forward. And you have to do is care and allow that care to become education and action. So what does that mean? And let me get rid of this stupid manner. So what does that mean?
You realize how ironic it is that you just did that?
It tears me up a little bit, but I think that the one question I get asked when I do have this conversation with white people and with a couple of Asian people, because I don't think Asian people are in the crosshairs, and I don't know that they get it in some cases. It's interesting, but it's like, what do I do? Be careful, be yourself, be genuine, but ask yourself a very simple question. Do you love your fellow man? Do you think black people are inferior? If you think black people are inferior, then great. Go pound salt and move on, because this is not something that you're not going to ever be part of the solution. If you genuinely have that fucked up concept in your head, then we've got no time for you. But if you really care about people, then listen to them. Listen to what they're saying. They're hurting. They're angry, yes, but they're hurting. And ask yourself why they're hurting, and then take that to heart, right? Why would you call somebody the N-bomb if you know it offends them? And this argument that, oh, well, they can say it and I can't, or we should, make it right, or all of these things, that's so much pedantic extra. Just don't say it. It hurts them. It hurts them badly. And why would you want to hurt them? And if you can come to that concept, then you'll do better. Maybe you think this is overblown. It's not. The pain is real. The problems are real. There's lots of evidence. Look at it. Be sensitive to it. If you don't know what to do with it, that's fine. The hashtag I come up with, and I've seen this on Twitter, is STFU and listen. Shut the fuck up and listen. Because people are trying to talk. And if you let it come to your heart, then you'll do better. You might help other people do better later. And that in and of itself will make things better. And I think that that's the key. If you want to have this conversation, do so. But if you don't want to have it, at least listen to what's being said. And apply some intelligence to it.
I will say this, and we still are in the land of the free. If you don't want to have the conversation, then just cut out the listen part, just STFU. If you're one of those people that just don't want to hear it, but for those of us that want to make the world, or let's not say the world, let's start with just our community and our country, that just want to make our community country a better place. Do that, STFU, and listen. If you have something intelligent to add, have that conversation. The best thing that you can do, which is one of the things I talked about last week with members of my company when asked, was the worst thing that we always do as a company and as a country is we don't just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room. There's nothing wrong with talking about the elephant in the room, especially if you have some, not necessarily like-minded, but some type of intelligent people that can process a thought or actually listen to another side without getting so offended because they can't see past their own little whatever it is. If you don't have anything to add, if you're racist, you probably don't want to listen to me anyway. So so you probably don't want to speak because trust me, you're going to get upset because I'm not one of those turn the other cheek Negroes. So you're probably going to get upset by that. And I've had people defriend me on Facebook about that I knew in the Air Force, but I don't care because that's how I feel. I don't need you in my life anyway. If you're that type of person, you just were behind the wrong mask. But no, going back to the original point, as I take a drink here, get my Joe Rogan on. Although he smokes weed, I have my scotch. Johnny Walker
It's a Wednesday night. You have to work tomorrow.
It's not a whole lot. Chill out. So, times is hard these days. I don't know if I can walk outside my door. No, just kidding.
Yes.
But no, like the best thing you can do is have those conversations. If you're willing to engage someone, have the conversation, but you're going to have to do a whole lot of listening. That's like the book, The 5 Love Languages, that, sometimes you just have to listen. And that's what a lot is not going on by Caucasian people. It's react as soon as they see. You watch Doctor Who?
No.
Or have you watched Doctor Who?
Nope.
Okay. So this is lost on you.
Original nerd going back all the way, and I've never seen a single episode. And screw you, Derek.
Well, I was going to bring him up because he will understand this analogy, right? So in the Doctor Who show, and this isn't meant to be humorous, I'm just making an analogy. In the Doctor Who show, some of his arch rival is the Master, but one of his big protagonists are these race of killer robots called the Daleks. And pardon me, DC, if I am overgeneralizing what they are. So don't kill me on that. That's not the point of the conversation. It's for me to be accurate. Come on the show and we'll talk about that later. But the Daleks are an enemy of Doctor Who. My wife and I, we're watching this show right now, and it's always hilarious when the Daleks come on because anytime they see the Doctor, they start shaking and like exterminate because like they gotta kill the Doctor because they hate him that much. And they get so mad when they see the Doctor that these robots start shaking, and sometimes they levitate in the air and they start shooting blindly. That's kind of like how some white people and cops are when they see black folks in a nice car or doesn't do what they say or corrects them in a park. They start shaking. Oh my God, black person, discriminate is what they do instead. So. Go ahead.
So I was going to say that, again, I just don't see that often. And I know it's out there. I've seen it enough to know it exists, but I don't think it's pervasive. Mm-hmm. And part of what I think is going on is that white people aren't listening, right? We know that. Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't want to hear that. White privilege. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't want to hear that. Here's some ideas. Oh, that's not going to work. I did that to you the other day. I don't know that defunding the police works. Although learned a lot about that in the last 48 hours in the concept.
Right.
So, okay, maybe we'll talk about that on a different show. But, there are a lot of there are a lot of white people that I know that if a African American pulled up to my office in a nice car and was wearing a good suit, other than that might be novel to them, I don't know that there would be a reaction other than, is he bringing us business? I don't know that it should be immediately assumed that all white people are afraid of black people, or that
Well, no.
that they have ill intentions. The white privilege is maybe a thing, maybe isn't a thing. Boy, that's going to sound bad. I take that right back. I don't know how to discuss that. Let's just pretend I didn't say that last thing. Obviously, it is a thing, and if it wasn't a thing, it's not politically correct. I recognize that concept right now, and I don't want to get canceled. It is a thing, but I don't know that it is something that people are taking advantage of intentionally on a regular. And I don't know how to say that because I don't want to diminish the conversation, and I'm not trying to make excuses or buy cover. But I think that goes back to my idea that we need to give each other the benefit of the doubt. There ain't a whole lot of white people that are sitting down with black people and breaking bread, don't understand what you guys go through. But I don't know that there's a whole lot of black people sitting down and breaking bread with white people and trying to explain that conversation, right? And that is also part of the problem. And I don't know how to fix it. This is you and me trying to fix it. That's what we've been talking about for 10 years, that conversation needs to happen. So if I've had that conversation with you and my extended family, and you are all around all kind of white people, I guess most black people probably know what white people think all the time because you live in the white world. But I don't know that you know what we think about and talk about when you're not around. You presume, and in some cases you're right, but it's not, the N-bombs don't come flying out. Quite the opposite, right? And the jokes and the cartoons and those things that have happened in the past, they don't happen around me. Maybe it's because I don't tolerate them, but I would like to see more people sitting down and breaking bread. So you and I have this conversation and we post it to the internet, and now people have to deal with the fact that there's at least one white person who comes from a conservative background but isn't a Republican and doesn't hate anybody and wants everybody to get along and goes out of his way to try to do so. And here's at least one black person who's intelligent and has a perspective and isn't hating on anybody. And that's what we're trying to do here, I think.
Right.
But I want to be careful about stereotypes going either way or generalizations.
No, generalizations and stereotypes are bad, but I think one of the things that we both can say, we are both against the mold. Like people have whatever stereotype they want when they first meet us, and then within a few seconds they're changed. I'm not out to try to change somebody's opinion, not one person. I'm out to try to change the world any way that I can. If I can just change one person, that's great, but I'm not trying to direct anything at one person, especially if they're that close-minded to where they're not willing to judge someone on the content of their character before even meeting them or just assuming the best, right?
Yeah.
But no, we've had a lot of fallout from what's going on. You talked about cancel culture, and that is happening. There are a lot of people getting canceled. You got wrestlers getting canceled because they post the wrong thing. You got some chick off of some MTV reality show. I don't know what they play on MTV these days, but she just got canceled. Drew Brees almost got canceled. And so me and my father, we had a pretty good back and forth on Facebook on his post. I don't know if you probably didn't see it, but on his post in regards to Drew Brees. A lot of people that know me know that for years, I haven't been a Drew Brees fan. It was just something about his act that I could always see through that I didn't like. And so it was on full display last Wednesday when he was asked about in regards to the movement that's right now and what there were players in the NFL protesting. Colin Kaepernick were protesting years ago. What would you feel about people protesting right now? And it said, what would you feel, and what is it on you as a leader? What would you have to say about that, or what would you like to see happen or do about that? He was asked as a leader. Instead, Drew Brees answered the question of what the flag meant to him. And if you to say it came off terrible would be an understatement.
Yeah.
And the way it came off was, I don't care what y'all black asses are going through, respect the flag at all time. My grandfathers fought in World War II. Well, and I went on Drew Brees' Twitter and I lit him up on it. My grandfather fought in World War II also. Like I spoke about earlier in the show, he was one of the first African American members of the Army Air Corps. So he fought in World War II. He drew blood in World War II. He drew blood in fascist Italy, where Mussolini was. So to think that your grandfathers won World War II by themselves, I felt was very insulting. And then on top of that, he wants to talk about history, not even acknowledging the things that African American soldiers came home to in World War II. So, look, we people have the right to protest the flag. It's you're not supposed to feel comfortable with it. I mean, I the initial issue I had with Colin Kaepernick, it wasn't that he protested, because obviously I was 100% with him. But protest isn't supposed to make you feel comfortable. What I was worried about was like, my God, people are going to turn this into a flag debate, and I'll be damned if they didn't do it. And they co-opted his message and made it all about that. The people that knew, that actually cared, they stuck with what that he was trying to bring attention to in the NFL. The NFL could have been on the right side of history years ago. The NBA gets passed off as a league that is so player friendly and we're liberal and all this stuff, right? But they had a rule because they blackballed a player back in 1995. Chris Jackson, known as Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, one of the best point guards to ever play, and you'll never know it. As a member of the Denver Nuggets, he protested the national anthem and he would sit down. He never played in the NBA again after 1996, I believe. Never played in the NBA again. And the NBA went as far as to make a rule that you will stand when the national anthem plays. But yet the NBA is seen as this great league that works with its players, and it does now. But the reason why they don't kneel is because they have a rule, and the people follow it no matter what. The NFL didn't have such a rule. They tried to retroactively make one, but they could have been on the right side of history. But they let the president, the current president, and some very bigoted owners co-opt the message.
So the
and
NFL,
so fast forward.
The NFL was stuck between a rock and a rock because they want to make the players happy, so they need to allow the protest, but then they want to make the owners and the public happy, some of which were wildly against it. The message was lost. It was co-opted. It became about the flag, and I never understood that. And that's a good try. Well, you keep going. You said fast forward.
But yeah, so now we fast forward all these years, and guess what? The same damn thing Colin Kaepernick was talking about, I'll be damned if it doesn't, because it's always been happening.
Yep.
And a lot of people could have been on the right side of history on this and gotten out and used their influence, like a Drew Brees that came off so tone deaf to like, and this is what really made me mad about Drew Brees. I don't care too much for the guy to begin with, because I think his act is fake. It may be genuine, but it comes off fake to someone like me. Is Drew Brees had 4 years to get ready to be asked this question again. And he went with the same damn answer he went with 4 years ago.
Yeah. It speaks to a couple of things. Number one, how stupid do you have to be to give that line? Just shut the fuck up. Seriously.
Right.
There's a certain amount of intelligence that has to be applied in some situations. There are riots, not just protests. There are riots. And someone sticks a microphone in your face, and you are a public figure. You're a celebrity, and you get paid to play a game, millions and millions of dollars. And they say, "What do you think of protests?" You say, "Wow, I wish I had paid attention earlier." You could say anything. You could say, "I have to go talk to my friends and be on their side. I have to be with my teammates." You don't even have to say anything. You could just say something that's benign and then move on.
Here's the thing. Here's what this clown could have said, right? And I'm trying not to get too emotional about it, but because, like you said, there are so many other things he could have said. He could have still worked in his little propaganda, right? And said that, you know what? For me personally, I wish everybody would stand for the flag and show respect to the flag for our country, simply because That's what I believe in, and I think we can overcome this with unity. However, there's an issue we need to address right now because here is what's the most important thing. We got brothers still getting killed by the cops in the streets with no due process, right? And to think that this clown has been down in New Orleans all this time and that never popped in his head, it's like, where have you been, man? And that just shows to show how detached he is. But
So
that's a lot of the people in the country.
when they have a locker, here's an interesting question though. You've got a problem with the guy in general, so you're hostile, which is good for my question. So they go into closed doors and they bring in Shaq for whatever reason, and they have a conversation, and then they come out and the wagons are circled, and he's saying that he was wrong, and he's saying that he's going to try to do better, and his players say they believe him, and so they're going to move forward as a family. And that's the end of it as far as they're concerned. Now, my perspective is, and again, every scenario is different, and there's a smell test. But my perspective is to respect that and let them move on. And maybe, earmark in your head, but, what do you take on that? Because that's the benefit of the doubt that I talk about, second chances.
That's the thing. I am okay with that. That if he talks it out with his teammates, they said we're okay with it, with his apology, and he's saying this is what he's going to do, then okay, here's what you say you're going to do. I believe you when you see it, when I see it, if you say you're going to do it. But right now, I'm not going to throw it in your face every day if you say you're sorry, and I'm going to write a letter to Trump on Twitter, and then I'm going to reach out to prominent African Americans, be like, okay, now I understand, and here's what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm going to wait to see it. But if in 6 months they ask you the question and you're not in your right mind and that still comes out again, then clearly you're protecting those endorsements, because now his first apology when he came out with it, here's what I did. Like, you weren't on this stream, but I was talking with my former co-host of Real Talk and a few other people. I said, here's got to go to play, and this is the day before. This is the day before. I said, and I'm just messing around with them. I said, so which one of y'all is going to write Drew Brees' apology that he's going to put out tomorrow? I wake up the next day, Drew Brees is apologizing, right?
Of course,
and he's saying all this stuff, because the thing about it is, if you are that stringent on what you believe in about the flag, don't apologize. Be like, here's what I feel, right? But instead, as soon as he apologized, it's like, okay, here's what he's trying to do, because they were chanting F Drew Brees in the street. And so he was losing his locker room too, especially those receivers, especially Michael Thomas. And then you got people chanting F Drew Brees in the street, and in the cancel culture that we have right now, rightfully so. I don't like with that. I think he saw them. My first thing was like, he see them dollars about to disappear. So here's what he's doing. This is damage control. But then he issued another apology, and then he put out a video, and then he wrote something to Trump. And so, at that particular point, it's like, okay, if you're going through all this effort, then you must be intending to follow through on something. So now at this particular point, we got to sit back and say, okay, I don't think at that point, and even for a staunch anti-Drew Brees person as myself, I don't think you can still continue to be like, no, F you, Drew. I don't think you can do that. I think at that point, it's like, okay, you've done all of this, and you clearly seem to think you're trying to make things right, and you're going to keep pushing, and you're calling out the president, all that stuff. Okay, I'm not saying I forgive you, but what I'm saying is at this point, I'm going to stop my criticism. I'm going to sit back, and I'm going to watch you and see if you're going to follow up on what it is that you're going to say. He had an interesting conversation with Shannon Sharp after that, where Shannon Sharp pretty much said the same thing I did. And he told him that, obviously I don't have that microphone in front of Drew Brees. He just sees what I wrote on Twitter, right? But he had a conversation with Shannon Sharp, and what Shannon Sharp told him was,
see what you wrote on Twitter.
He may not have, but it's out there for the record if he's feeling bored one night, because I call him a jackass too. But one of the things Shannon Sharp told him was like what the movement needs, because I think you and I have had this conversation before. Racism is not a problem for black people to solve. This is a problem for white people to solve. And the one thing that Shannon Sharp told him was, We need powerful white men like yourself to be that spearhead, to be like, hey, we need to get legislation changed. We got to do all these different things, because it's one thing for Pierre Robinson, or God damn it, for Pierre Robinson and Shannon Sharp to say it, but they're black, and who listens to us anyway? Take a look at how Laura Ingraham treated LeBron James as opposed to Drew Brees, if you in for some good hypocritical entertainment. But it's one thing for us to say it, but it's one thing for enough prominent white people to say it, especially with the following that a Drew Brees has. And so that's the type of things that get things changed. And that's what Shannon Sharp told him. So at this particular point with Drew Brees, I'm not at the point where I'm gonna keep criticizing him. It's like, okay, you apologize, whatever about your apology, but you're doing all this extra stuff. Are you trying to save your reputation, or do you really mean it? You've gone above and beyond what you've done before. I'm gonna wait and see. I'm not forgiving you, and I'm not letting you off the hook. But if they ask me, Pierre, what you think about Drew Brees today, I'm going to say, I'm going to wait and see. Ask me in 6 months. Ask me in a year.
It's hard to know, because, these people all have marketing, and it's such an automatic thing, right? You say something stupid, and, well, you say something that's taken as being stupid, offensive, by whatever element. And it could be something extreme. You could say something innocuous, innocent, and one person doesn't like it. You could say something that's blatantly offensive, and unless you're the president of the United States, they will come for you. My perspective, I want it to be, think about who you are and what you think. Have those conversations with yourself in advance. Know how you feel, and then when someone asks you a question, decline to answer. When you answer genuinely, believe in what you're saying, and then be able to back it up. Don't say something that you're going to then turn around and apologize for. That's what I want to be the ideal. I hate it when these celebrities immediately are apologizing. But especially when they're being attacked for something that I don't think was a bad statement. But this is going to be on YouTube and Facebook. And somebody could be offended tomorrow. Somebody could be offended in 20 years by something that we think is perfectly fine. And God, I hope I get to make an apology and make it go away. So, the fear is there, and I have a little empathy with everybody.
Right. Speaking of apologies, though, I love how how all the companies started putting out all these statements, like Hulu now is like Black Lives Matter, Baskin and Robbins, and Ben and Jerry's, and all that stuff. Everybody is. It's like, okay, because y'all want us to keep spending money, huh? Don't you? You realize that, as many of us there is, if we stop spending money with you, that's going to put a dent in your pockets. Well, but the thing about it is,
if you don't do it, they will come for you. So you have to say something.
Well, not just that. You could be like Jerry Jones and say nothing. But no, the thing about it is,
but do you expect
what I'm riffing on? No, I don't. I don't expect anything from Jerry Jones. That's why I don't understand why black people like the Cowboys or even want to even go to the team. But that's just my opinion, or even want to do business with somebody like that. It is an impressive stadium, but that's the only thing good I can say about his team. But Dallas is a great city. I love Dallas. But the thing about it is, what's been crazy is watching these templated statements these companies are putting out. For the most part, they follow a script, and then I always love the apologies after someone personally, like Joe, gets caught saying something racist. No, I didn't really mean that. That's not reflecting my beliefs, and I am 100% behind. It's like, really, you are? It's like, holy cow, you all have the same publicist that's writing the same thing. It kills me. But I think what's happening right now with a lot of folks is, whereas before you had a lot of folks, black people, saying like, oh, let's just pray to forgive them. Now people are like, no, screw you. I'm not forgiving you. Go to hell. And that's what I want to see, because you have to hold these people accountable to let them know this ain't acceptable. When the one lady shot John Botham, and Dallas, the brother that was in his house that broke into his place, the cop, and blew him away, right? One of the things that made me mad was that her brother was like, I just want to give you a hug and we're going to pray with you and all that. And I told my family, and it went without saying, but I was like, just to let you know, somebody blow me away. You better not get your ass on TV talking about like, I forgive you and I'm going to give you a hug and pray with you. Oh, I will come back from the dead to personally you
one of the
know.
reasons that we can have this conversation is because we've gone to the mat with each other
Right.
on these issues, right? So, and we will not agree on things, although I think that the disagreements are benign. They're very small, and that we will, move past them. But for example, once upon a time, something happened, and I said, "This is a great example of an innocent white person putting their foot in their mouth because they don't know what the correct answer is and not meaning anything by it, right?" Because I was that person. So I said, "What is their phrase? Hugs and prayers or something
Uh huh.
like that on Facebook."
Yeah.
And you were like, "Fuck you and your hugs and your prayers," because I'm tired of hugs and prayers. And I'm like, "Whoa, where's this coming from?" And then it was like, we need to action, we need activity, we don't need positive feelings, because positive feelings go away when you fall asleep, and it was like, and then I was like, okay, screw you, because you don't know where I'm coming from, you don't know my mindset, and maybe it is a good thing and you shouldn't dismiss it. They have a Christian ethic. Ultimately, that Christian ethic is what we're all going to want in play. So if if he can be good with her and find that it was a mistake, a terrible mistake, white privilege in full motion,
Right.
that's his take on it. Then good for him, in my opinion. And I know that you have a problem with it. That's fine. We'll agree to disagree.
Right. Yeah.
Because
It's just certain things that
if I
I
killed
think after a
anybody,
while, after you, well, my thing is, after a while, once you keep hearing the same excuses, I fear for my life, or here's what I thought, you keep hearing it over and over like a broken record. It's kind of like, look, at this point, it's a script. I know the deal. This is what's going to give you the sympathy.
smell
I don't
test.
want to hear that. Yeah, right. I want to hear that. Like, let's be real about it. Yeah, I shot his ass because he was black. I mean, hell, I would probably respect you more if you came out and said that. I probably wouldn't, but, it's just like, you know, you keep hearing the same thing over and over. It's like,
I,
give me a
s-
break.
I remember saying something when Michael Brown happened, that I said it at the time. I said it to you in an email, like the day after, and I said, "This has got to be a mistake. There's got to be more to this, because even if the guy is racist, what cop is going to go, well, there's a black guy and I'm just not having a good day. I got to kill him. Even if I know him, he's got to die." You don't do that today, because look what happened. It's self-evident, and cops know that more than anybody else, that it's coming. So why would you put yourself in that position if you could help it at all? And yet here you got a guy leaning on a guy's neck, going, "You're gonna be fine. Don't worry about it." Holy crap! There's a million better ways. He had time. I don't want to get into it. This guy had time to know that this could go bad and to back off. He wasn't in danger. There was no activity going on, and there's a camera on you. So I genuinely don't get it. So my point is that when Michael Brown happened, I didn't want to believe it was happening. Clearly, this is a mistake. But then, you know, uh, it's happening over and over again. So now I have to deal with adjusting my perspective, because clearly there are people that just don't care. And they are willing to push violence to the point where somebody could die. Maybe that's their intent in some cases. And obviously it is. So it's a overwhelming and alarming, and I hate it. And it is what it is. We got to do better. I'm going to say this though. You talked about Drew Brees, and I think everybody should stand for the national anthem, the flag, because blah blah blah. I don't agree with that. And we're going to talk about something else here. In fact, I'll throw the banner up, because this is a good transition to something that's coming up today,
Right.
and then we're going to wrap up with this, because we're well over an hour. But you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm different, but I always think that getting stuck on the particulars of a situation, but ignoring the the meaning behind it, is a mistake. I could care less about a piece of fabric, stars and bars, or stars and stripes. Respect the stars and stripes, because it's the traditional thing to do, and I love my country, and I love the sacrifice that people have made. But that's not what that flag is about. That flag is about our country as a whole. And if someone wants to, I'm a big fan of, I've seen your dad post and I've seen you post. I'm a big fan of freedom of speech in all cases. I don't think there's any rule where it should be limited. So if there is somebody that wants to wear the Confederate flag, I think they absolutely have the right to do it. Wave it outside your house. I have no problem with them doing that as it is their right. But be prepared to deal with the prosecution in the court of public opinion that is rightfully coming for you. I won't have it. I won't tolerate it. And I will talk to you about it if you do it. But you have the right. There shouldn't be a law saying you shouldn't do that. There shouldn't be a law saying you can't burn the American flag, although I'm wildly opposed to it. And there shouldn't be a rule that says Colin Kaepernick can't take a knee. You're lucky he's not waving his fist around or beating on somebody. He's angry about something that's real. Why don't you ask him what he's trying to get to and maybe have a conversation about how you can help, instead of getting stuck on the fact that he even kneeled out of respect. I'm not going to stand up. I want to call my attention to the distress I'm feeling about being part of this nation. Whether you agree with him or not, have some empathy, and if you want to ignore him, but let the guy do what he's doing. He's not hurting anybody. So this whole outrage at the situation is, I think we're missing the point, and I hate that. But it does take us to the Confederate flag and the stars and bars. So set up that conversation. We're recording beginning of June 2020.
Right. So where the conversation comes from is NASCAR, a sport wildly associated with the South, to put it mildly, and also with the Confederacy. They decided today that when we have a race going on and we're on the property, no Confederate flags will be displayed. So I believe that means that you can't show up to the tailgate, the NASCAR tailgate. You can't be flying the flag, or they're going to ask you to leave. That's pretty much the gist of it. And I actually agree with that because, look, we're at a sporting event. And whether people like it or not, it is a symbol of hate. They can try to say Southern pride all you want, but when they're flying Confederate flags along with saying racial slurs, you can't convince me otherwise. And I don't care who gets mad about that. You can, get hung by your own hate rag, as I called it. But I agree with that because that's a sporting event. Whether it's predominantly white or not is irrelevant. There are black people that go to it, and everybody should feel comfortable when they go.
This guy's name is, I never heard of him. This guy's name is Bubba.
Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace.
Wallace.
He came last year. He came in second.
Is he related to the other? Isn't there a racing family called Wallace? And is he part?
Yeah,
of
there's
that?
a Wallace, but he's not related to him, or he wasn't. He's not related to him in the way by blood. They brought his ancestors. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
Yeah, right.
Shouldn't say that.
He lived in the other house.
He lived in the other house.
Right.
But no, Bubba, he came in second at the Daytona 500 last year, and so people took notice of him, and so he's black, and he decided, like, you know what, I'm in this predominantly white, I'm paraphrasing for him, but this is pretty much how he went about it. I'm this predominantly white sport, and here's what's going on. I can't not say nothing. I've tried to be ambivalent before. I got to say something. And a lot of the NASCAR drivers actually went along with them. Now, it's a lot of fans that don't like it, but that's those fans because they're out of touch with what's actually going on with the country, or they're not out of touch. They just don't care. And that's probably what it is. So
again,
that's what NASCAR has, right? NASCAR has decided it.
Give them 5 years, they'll get over it, and then it'll be fine.
They'll get over it by the end of the year. So they'll be mad the rest of the year. They'll be okay. They're not going to boycott NASCAR, so they're not going anywhere. But that's pretty much what the gist of it is that, hey, you're not flying that flag anymore because it's a symbol of hate. And everybody knows it's a symbol of hate. People can try to lie all they want. Obviously, I'm going to say people can fly whatever flag they want, right?
Here's
as long as you don't do it in my neighborhood, you're okay. That's number one.
Yeah. Here's a little
and
history.
then the other. Yeah, go ahead.
For anybody that they talk about states' rights and the South and all of that. So let me just clarify, and these are historical facts that you can go back and look at. I have a minor in U.S. history, and my paper was on exactly this thing. Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860. The argument that South Carolina had was his plank in the platform that the Republican belief that Not that slavery should be made illegal, but that no more slave states should be admitted to the Union. So they didn't like that their balance of power was going to be upset in the Senate, and that would eventually lead to an abolishment of slavery. And so the Civil War, the secession was about slavery, preserving slavery in the South. For whatever reason, social reasons, religious reasons, economic reasons, whatever traditional reasons. But it was about keeping the black man in chains and all of the terrible things that went with that. And so the northern perspective was very much not let's free our brothers. It was more let's preserve the Union. But the idea that it was the Confederate states looking for their states' rights is not accurate. It was not accurate at the time. There's a billion speeches that were made at the time that are on record that make it very clear that, at least from the Southern perspective, it was a fight to preserve the right to keep black men, fellow Americans, fellow men, Americans otherwise, in chains, break their families up, murder them, whip them, lynch them. It's a terrible thing, a horrendous concept. I can't wrap my brain around it, the fact that it existed. And I'm proud to say that at least some of my ancestors fought against it, and came from a Quaker and a abolitionist background. So, if our forefathers count, then I've got a little bit of scoreboard on the right side of history. And I've got some bad people on the other side too. Most of them are from Europe, so it doesn't really matter. I'm getting sidetracked. But the point is, Confederate fan, that you're incorrect about states' rights being what your country stood for and what your supposed country will rise again for. All of that is a invention after the fact. It's called the Lost Cause movement. Look it up. And it was invented a generation later for people who were pro-Confederate to try to give themselves an out and an excuse. And that's exactly what it is. It's an excuse. The Confederate flag represents a failed experiment, and it is directly tied to slavery. So there are some innocent people who don't know that history and that wave that flag because that's the way they were raised, and I feel sorry for those people. But you have that right. The court of public opinion is coming for you, and just know you're wrong. And if you think I'm lying, look it up. And if you didn't know, now you know. And that's what this conversation is about. This is why we're trying to do, is talk these things through and make people aware. Maybe I can tell you and your family and black people that are watching some of the things that some white people believe and think. And maybe we can dispel some myths that we're not all this way, or that we all are that way. Or, hey, here's a question that we would love to see answered because we don't understand. And those are all concepts for future shows. But anybody who is a big fan of the Confederate flag, unless you're a racist and you're hoping the Klan makes a resurgence, I don't think that your faith in that piece of material is properly placed. And anybody who's going to go to war over protests, burning a flag, disrespecting a flag, I think you're missing the point, at least in some cases. Ask why they're doing that, and then judge them based upon that message and not what they're doing with a piece of material. It's a symbol, but it's only a symbol. It's not the actual country. That's my wisdom dropped.
Good points. And that's the other thing I say about the flag. It is a symbol. It's an important symbol, but you don't fight for the flag. You fight for what's written in the Constitution. What are your rights here in this country? So ultimately, the Constitution is actually more important than the flag. And I think that gets lost amongst a lot of people. So that's my wisdom drops for folks. You know how I feel about the Confederate flag. Obviously, I'm biased, rightfully so. But no, that's how I feel. It's a symbol of hate. I wish the United States would go the route of what Germany did after World War II. But we do have this thing called the Constitution that I did fight for, and a lot of other people did. Your ancestor, your father, my father, a grandfather, and things of that nature. So you have the right to do it. It doesn't make it right. And ultimately, you will be proven to be on the wrong side of history, and bad things will happen to you.
So we'll agree to disagree. I've heard you say multiple times that here are some examples of where free speech should be curtailed. And not that sounds very offensive to the ear as a concept, but you've said, I don't think that people should be able to say this, or I think it's really bad when they say that. I disagree. I think people should be able to say what they want. I don't know where we draw those lines. As soon as we start drawing those lines, somebody else will draw a line against us, and that's a problem. So I hold to the absolute concept of freedom of speech. I think we're stronger for it. And when someone says something stupid, like the orangutan that sits in the White House, you know, it's good in that we can all hear how ridiculous he is, and hopefully more people than not will recognize that. I think we're going through a painful process along those lines now, but again, that's a future show. But everyone should be aware that I am very much against Donald Trump being president, and I think Pierre is as well, although a separate show.
Separate show, but I'm against it. But you know how I feel when it comes to, like, I'm still going to show certain respect. I'm against it, but
The difference, the only difference we had was, again, it is a separate show, but the short gist of it was you wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt that I talked about. You wanted to give him a chance to fail, and he did spectacularly since then. But
right.
in the
And
beginning,
at that point, it's not much more you can say. It's like, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. So he's talking his noise because I know he likes to talk, and it's like, one of the things he could have done was actually try to come through on things so he could brag about it since he likes to talk, and he did nothing. So it's like, I don't need to say much more.
right.
It's already been
All right.
said.
So, all right. So we're closing in on 90 minutes. I
not
want
bad.
to I want to talk about what we're going to do here going forward. All right. So the original intent of Brother and the Man was the general observation was that there's a whole lot of people talking, talk. People on the extreme right, people on the extreme left. They've grabbed the megaphone. They have Twitter. They have social media, and 10,000 people going to war against whoever, cancel culture, is a huge number. It's very scary. But then you think about 10,000 out of 300 million, 350 million is not anything. It's a slice. We are reacting wildly to the talking heads on the extremes. So we don't feel that way in many cases. We are in the middle. We're moderates in many, many different areas, and yet we don't hear moderate voices enough. So the original intent of us rehydrating the idea of the podcast, now a vidcast, is to have these conversations on a regular basis so we can at minimum be on record and we could come clean with our own conscience. Because I have to say something to Pierre, to the brother, that I have to say it to his face, and I have to put it on the internet. So I will come clean with my own conscience and kind of find that proper statement, and then it'll become part of me, and I'll be a better person than I was. It's cathartic and it's clarifying, but also it's an opportunity for us to have fun. We're going to talk about wrestling. We're going to talk about Marvel movies. We have a whole list of things we want to talk about, and the intent was to start recording these in small snippets, 20 minutes, and releasing those, and doing vidcasts, and maybe doing some live shows, and all of those things are out there. We weren't supposed to be live. We weren't supposed to be posting this until at least July 1st. But boom, COVID happened, and now Black Lives Matter is back and bigger than ever, and we just felt like we had to start. So that's what we're doing. We're going to start doing these once a week. We are going to try to be a little bit more organized. We're going to be a little bit tighter. We may record 2 hours and break them up into 20-minute segments and release them a little bit at a time. We're going to vidcast. We're going to podcast. We're going to do some live. If you want to be part of this, let us know, because we can bring you right into this conversation from any platform. We're going to try to make the technology better. We have no set plans, but we are here. We're not going away. This is episode 1 of season 1, and episode 2 of season 2 is coming. What do you got?
I think you said it in a nutshell. We started earlier than we wanted, but it's good that we started it instead of being late to the party and reacting to something that may not necessarily be a hot button issue at the time. So I'm glad we started early. Bear with us. It's not perfect. Will it ever be perfect? Probably not. Can we get close to perfect? Yes, we can. But like you said at the beginning of the show, don't concentrate on the lighting. Don't concentrate on the crazy graphics. Don't concentrate on the blank background back here. I thought I actually put something up and it didn't show up. Concentrate on the content of what we're talking about, especially if you're watching us on video. Obviously, it's going to be easier to concentrate on the content if you're just listening to us audio only. So if you do want to be part of it, there are ways to get in touch with us: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, subscribing to this on YouTube. We got plenty of different ways. We want to have that conversation. I want to do more lighter topics, but this was something that needed to be addressed. There was something I wanted to do just for fun with you for the show, but it didn't seem appropriate for this. We'll do that on the next show because there was something that happened between now and the last time we recorded that I really wanted to, make light of, but we didn't get a chance to because of what's going on right now. But thanks for listening. Glad to be here. Look forward to being with you further. Have a good one.
And we are out.